gentlemen, and welcome to the next episode. Well, in this episode, we are finishing our movement and rotation topic. So, in this video, we are going to send the data from the client to the server and also from the server to the client. And also, we are doing a few changes to our code. Since in the first part of the movement video, I did, or we, well, I did a bit of a mistake there, which we are going to fix. And yeah, I would say right away we are going to start with our, let's say our input manager on the client. So let's open it up. And what you can see right there is what we did on the last video, where we are checking our camera. Okay, we're checking our input and all kinds of stuff. Okay, as next, of course, we want to check our rotation. Okay, so we can send our rotation from the client to the server. To do that, basically, is we are going to rotate the player itself on the client and also send its value to the server. So before we are doing that, we are going to create in our input manager public variable, a public float, and call it rotation. Simple as that. After that, we are going to create a new method above or below our check camera, and we call this private void check rotation. Within our check rotation, we are going to make a check. So we are typing, which is necessary. For some reason, it is necessary to type out GameObject.transform instead of transform only. Don't ask me why, but somehow Unity only accepts the information to get edited when you actually type out GameObject.transform instead of just transform. Okay, so GameObject.transform.local Euler angles, okay, equals to new vector 3, and now we are making the rotational data. So we are going to say again GameObject.transform.local Euler angles.x, comma, now we are going to say GameManager.instance.wrap Euler angles, and then our rotation. Okay, since we are only rotating on the y-axis. And last but not least, GameObject.transform.local Euler angles.z. And that's it. Perfect. Now we did set up the transform and rotation of this GameObject, which is attached to. And now we can say network send player rotation, and we are typing out rotation. So don't worry, we are creating the send player rotation right away. But before we are doing that, we are going to our game manager instance wrap Euler angles with control and left mouse click. You jump directly to the method, and now we are checking if everything was correct. So yeah, as I can see, everything is fine right now. Perfect. Okay, so go back to network send, and now let's create the send method where we are going to send the player rotation. First of all, type out C player rotation on the client packets. And now create a new static void and call it send player rotation. And what do we need? We do need a float of a rotation. Okay. So now type in the packet. So byte buffer equals buffer new byte buffer 4. And now write the packet identifier, which means buffer.write int 32. Of course, we do need an int. There you go. And now we can say client packets dot the player rotation. Okay, last but not least, we are going to write a single buffer.write single, and we are typing in our float of rotation right here. Okay, last but not least, network config.socket.send data buffer.data and buffer.head. Now we just say buffer.dispose. Okay, now we are ready to send the data over from our client to the server. Okay, let's go back to our input manager because we also need to check our rotation always. So go in your update method, and above check input, we are going to say check rotation. Simple as that. Okay. After the update, after we check the rotation, we want actually to get something into our rotation float, okay? So we are going to say rotation is equal to game manager dot instance dot unwrap Euler angles transform dot local Euler angles dot y. This is our rotation, and which is already converted or unwrapped, and now we are ready to go. Simply as that. Okay. Now, last but not least, we want to receive the information from the server to the client, and that is what we are going to do right now before we move on to the server. So within network receive, we create another package which means S player rotation. There you go. Okay. Within our player rotation, we are creating with Control D, we're creating a new packet to our packet router. So S player rotation is equal to packet player rotation, which we are going to create in a second. So scroll down to the bottom of the script and type out private static void packet underscore player rotation. And of course we need a ref of a byte array, and parameter is data. Okay, now we can read out the information we are getting from the server. So what do we get from the server? Well, basically we are getting the connection ID, which player is rotating, and of course its rotational information. So we can say byte buffer equals new byte buffer 4, which is completely wrong. Because we need our byte buffer data. There you go. And then we can read out the information. So int connection ID is equal to buffer.readIn32. And then we need the float, which is the rotation, is equal to game manager dot instance dot wrap Euler angles, and then we can say buffer dot read single. So we're directly converting it into the Unity data, so our game object is rotating correctly. So now we can say if our connection ID is equal to our network manager dot instance dot my connection ID, then we return, because we don't want to return our player since we are rotating him locally. Okay. And if we are getting another connection ID which we can rotate to, we are making a check. So if not, game manager dot instance player list dot contains key of the connection ID, then we return as well, because then the player is not on our map or not connected to the world. And if that is correct, then we can say game manager dot instance dot player list connection ID dot player object, which we apparently don't have. Okay, since we do have a game object itself, so we can say transform dot rotation is equal to new quaternion 0 rotation 0 0. Awesome. And last but not least, we are going to say buffer.dispose. Simple as that. Okay, so now let's check in our input manager. When do we send our rotational data? We send our rotational data when we are actually an active game object, which makes sense, right? Perfect. Now, since we are done with that, we can go up to our server. So within our server, I did a slight of a mistake, which causes a little bit of trouble right there. Within our input manager on the server, I have actually swapped our sinus and cosinus, which is not correct. So first of all, we need to fix our method right there. So convert rotation sinus, we need to delete one math round right there. So, because that does not make any sense. So, and the same we do on convert rotation cosine and delete it as well. So we only have the math round math sine and rotation multiplied by math pi divided by 180, and the digits are the value of 4. There you go. Okay, the next mistake I did basically is convert rotation cosine is not on the x-axis. It is convert rotation sine. So convert rotation sine, player rotation, and on the z-axis it is convert rotation cosine. So just swap that right away, and the same you do on the S key on x and z. So convert rotation cosine to convert rotation sine, and the same we do on the other stuff. Okay, but on the pressing the key A and D, we will remain what we did there. Okay, so we just swap the first two keys, so W and S. So we are good to go. Okay, perfect. Now, since we have done that, we can check on our network receive on the server to read out the informational data of the player. So first of all, add the packet identifier, which will be the player rotation. Now add it to the packet identifier, so client packets.c player rotation, and the method will be packet player rotation, which we are going to create right now. So create a method to read out the information. So private static void packet underscore player rotation, and we do need a parameter of int connection ID and ref byte array data. Okay, now let's read out the information. So byte buffer is equal to new byte buffer and the data. Now byte, what do we read out? Well, we just read out the rotational data of the player itself. So byte, float rotation is equal to buffer.read single. Simple as that. Then we can directly say buffer.dispose, right? As next, we are giving the player in the list the rotational information, since we already have in our player script the public float of rotation. So to do that, we are going to say game manager dot player list and then connection ID dot rotation is equal to rotation. Okay, perfect. And that's it for now with our receiving the packets. Now let's go back to our input manager. So in our input manager, of course, we are getting the player, which is the player list of the connection ID. So we get the rotational data back. As next, of course, we are moving the player in the right direction, right? Okay, perfect. Now, as next, we are going to send the data from the server to all clients. So let's go to network send and create the new package. So we say as player rotation right here. Okay, and now let's create the packet itself. So we can say public static void send player rotation. And what do we need? We do need an int connection ID, so which player we are rotating. And of course we do need, if I'm not mistaken, a float of rotation right away. Okay, now let's create the packet. So byte buffer equals new byte buffer of 4. Then we can say buffer.write integer 32. We do need an int of server packets dot as player rotation. And as next we do need a buffer dot write integer 32 of our connection ID. And last but not least, we do need a buffer dot write single rotation. And then we can say, do we have the public bool in game? Okay, so now we could say, so if not in game manager dot player list connection ID dot in game, then we return. So if the player is not in the game, then we return the information. And then last but not least, we can say network config dot socket dot send data to all but the connection ID. Since the local player is rotating himself, so we don't send his rotation to his client anymore. So connection ID and then buffer.data and buffer.head. Okay, and now we can say buffer.dispose. Simple, right? And now where do we send the player rotation? Well, for real, of course, we send the rotation within our, let's say, network receive. So every time we are getting a packet of player rotation, which is not the optimal way, okay, we will basically optimize everything later on when we are going more advanced. So every time we get a packet of player rotation, we can say network send dot send player rotation back to the, well, we don't want it to the connection ID and we want the rotation of rotation. There we go. Okay, and hopefully this should be everything now and we can go directly straight to a test. Okay, so let's start the server. So the server started, go back to Unity, wait till everything is compiled, which should be already compiled on your side since you guys have a better computer than I have, obviously. Okay, there you go. And now hit play. And what should happen now is we should be able to rotate, which we are not doing currently. But now we are moving, as you can see, in the right direction. Okay, perfect. So the reason why we are not rotating to the mouse anymore is following. Because actually we are not seeing the camera in its perfect way possible. So since we have adding a rotational data in it, as you remember, we are checking the camera in the fixed update, not right after the rotation happens. So now let's fix that. So close down the game, close down the server, and now go back to your client. Within your client, as you can see in the fixed update method, we are going to delete this. And now in between our check rotation and check input in the update method, we are going to say check camera. Okay, since we want to rotate after the rotation happens. So Let's go back to Unity, wait till everything is compiled, start the server right away, wait what happens, and now hit play. So what you can see now is the player, again, like in the last video, is perfectly rotating towards the mouse. Now, what happens when I press W? As you saw before, when I press W, our player moved upwards. Okay, when I pressed S, he moved downwards, A, he moved to the left, and D, he moved to the right. So, but now I am facing towards the bottom left corner, and when I press W, as you can see, the player is following the mouse. And that is how you calculate the rotational data perfectly within the server code, with not using Unity itself, just the rotational data of Unity, converting it to a wheel 360 degree. And now what you can see, I only press W. Well, I make it clear when I hit the player. As you can see right here, press key. What you see, only pressing W. And on the bottom, you see the rotational data. And on top of the transform rotation, you see the rotational data as well. So, perfect. Now when I hit S, what happens? He's moving backwards. When I hit D, he's moving on the left side, well, right from him in a circle, and the same for A. Perfect. Now I press W and he is following my mouse. As you can see on the left editor, he's always facing to the red line. And that's it. Perfect. Now we should check if it is possible when we have two clients, if both clients can see each other while moving in the correct rotational data. So stop playing, close the server right away, and build and run the project. And of course, don't forget to restart the server, else you cannot connect. So I move it to my second screen. Wait till everything is done. Okay, there you go. So the game is starting. We can see our player right here rotating. Now we are adding a second player to it. So right here, adding a second player to it. And what we should see, he is perfectly rotating. But now, as you can see right there, he's not rotating, but moving in the correct way, but he's not rotating on the other's client. Okay? And that we are going to fix within our next video. And our next video also contains a little bit of server-side collision and a little bit of bug fixes. So I hope you did like it, enjoy it. If so, hit a like, leave a comment, show me some love, join my Discord server, and see you guys in the next episode. Thank you for watching and bye.